Bloomberg News, our Germany government editor. Joining us on set in London is ResPublica Deputy Director Max Wind-Cowie. Max, thank you so much for coming in.
Good morning.
Merkel et al. Having this meeting, her Franco-Italian relations on the Garibaldi. What's the reality of this triptych of nations in terms of their starting point with Brexit?
Well, I think the reality is that these are the three kind of core central nations, kind of key partners in forming the European Union, and still see themselves and are the most powerful kind of triumvirate at the heart of it. I think from Angela Merkel's perspective, particularly, it's very important to shore up and stiffen the kind of wills of Hollande and of Matteo Renzi, because if you think about in France, elections coming up, Hollande is in a very difficult position next year, and Eurosceptic sentiment is growing, and there is fear across Europe from the Commission's perspective in particular, and Angela Merkel could be seen in this as their kind of political consort to the Commission. There is real fear that actually wills are not going to be stiff enough, and when it comes to those Brexit negotiations, if Theresa May can kind of keep her resolve, that there may be a preparedness to kind of bend in some of those other European countries. So she's shoring up the central kind of command structures first.
Give us a sense, Max, of when any of this might even kick off, because we're waiting for Article 50 to be enacted. There are, as you say, political roadblocks coming ahead next year. You've got elections in France and in Germany here. When will it be triggered from your point of view?
I don't think we're going to get any clear idea on is going to be triggered for some time. I think what's very interesting is David Davis, who's been appointed to be the Secretary of State for the newly kind of formed Brexit department here in Whitehall. He's commonly seen as a profoundly Eurosceptic, profoundly pro-Brexit politician, all of which is true. But he's also taken a very cautious approach to outlining what his strategy is going to be. He's talked about 6 months of research and stress testing before we even then come to a conclusion about what Brexit might look like from his perspective. And that being the case, I think there's going to be a lot of frustration in European capitals. You mentioned German and French elections. We also have in Italy a constitutional referendum coming up on which Matteo Renzi has staked his reputation and indeed his career as Prime Minister. There's going to be a lot of frustration coming up in European capitals as we try and work out what on earth Brexit looks like from London's perspective. But as I say, there is a real, there's a potential political and strategic advantage for the UK in holding off for as long as possible to see whether there's a better deal to be done slightly further down the line.
Who is Theresa May going to lean towards as the bulwark of her support? Will it be Merkel? Merkel can't publicly lean with May. So where does Theresa May lean for the bulk of her support in these negotiations?
I think that's an interesting question, and one of the problems that faces kind of all of the UK negotiating team, all of the UK negotiating strategies, there are no obvious friends, right? So we're not talking about, it's 27 countries, all with very different views and perspectives, sure, but none of them with the perspective, really, if we get down to it, that Britain should have everything that we want and have our cake and eat it. That being said, I think the sensible strategy when it comes to dealing with other European leaders is to start looking around the periphery and seeing who you can pick off. You're already seeing a slight kind of emergence of tension between some European leaders, be it in Poland, be it in the Netherlands, very different countries, but both with quite Eurosceptic populations, and that central bureaucracy built around the Commission. And that, to me, that provides Theresa May, provides the three very different men who've been put in charge of the different Brexit departments with the best opportunity for starting to actually reach and try and build some alliances that might lead to a deal that we can get on board with.
Max, talking about on board, they're going to be on board a ship, Renzi, Merkel, Hollande, and it's not just going to be Brexit they're talking about. There's also the ongoing concern about the refugee crisis sweeping through the rest of the EU, and indeed some key concerns when it comes to the deal that they brokered with Turkey, and it's starting to break down. Where do you believe these negotiations might go, and what ultimately can the Eurozone do in terms of helping refugees within the crisis, but equally be able to have the infrastructure to support it?
There are so many things going on here. Actually, the refugee crisis, apart from being a great kind of human tragedy, is a brilliant example of the extraordinary complexity at the heart of all matters Europe, and the difficulty that the European kind of central bureaucracy has in holding together the different strands that make it up, and trying to reach solutions that are practicable and democratically possible in terms of the political consent of European populations. As you say, I mean, the deal with Turkey that is the absolute cornerstone cornerstone of the European Union's attempt to resolve and deal with the refugee issue. And it's controversial in itself because of the approach that it takes, but that is falling apart before their very eyes. And so that whole cornerstone, that whole foundation stone of what they hoped would buy them some breathing spaces, you know, dealing also with ongoing economic problems in the Eurozone, dealing with Brexit, etc., is crumbling away. And that's really problematic. It is particularly problematic for Angela Merkel as she heads into next year's election cycle in Germany. She's got Alternative for Deutschland, a kind of very Eurosceptic, very anti-immigration party, biting at heels in a way that is not dissimilar necessarily, although not yet as ingrained as the situation with UKIP here in the UK. And I think that there's going to be a real kind of sense of pressure on Hollande, on Renzi, on Merkel as they meet today to try to find a solution to the refugee crisis that they can rely on delivering because they're not relying on someone else to do it.
Absolutely, Max. Let's see what comes out of this evening and this whistle tour diplomacy that Merkel has set for the agenda for the rest of the week. That is our guest from ResPublica, Deputy Director Max Wind-Cowie.